Hi, Sonia.
So we decided to get together to look at questions that have come up or questions that we've been asking um, on the benefits of doing family constellations in the family and also in business. So basically, how will this work help a coach become a better coach? You and I are both coaches, and I know that I use this work in my coaching all the time. It's like there's always that point where I say, I need the family constellation, or I need a just a coaching constellation. I call it a coaching constellation actually, when I deal with people's questions in relating to their work and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think the big question is, why should I ask? Why should I add coaching to my coaching portfolio as a coach? Why should I add family constellations as part of my training portfolio? What is the benefit of that? What does it bring additional to what normal coaching modalities are already bringing? So I think for me, that would be the core thing that coaches might be asking, right?
Absolutely. So I don't know about how you came across this and how you started benefiting, but I know that I did this work a long time before I actually did my coaching training. And with these wonderful techniques in the training, I thought, I don't need the constellations anymore. I didn't see the fit. And then when I started training, and especially when it came to family matters, I realized, yes, the coaching has a place, but I was faster getting the insights going when I did a constellation, a family constellation, or when somebody came to a decision making. And yes, in my coaching, I have beautiful decision making techniques. But then it was all of a sudden, let me see how I can do my constellation. And it just found a better way forward. So that was my experience. What's your experience?
Well, I'd like to add a short little narrative to it. You know, I exit the corporate life, my corporate life, around about 1999. And then I discovered that I had a talent in dealing with talented people, and that was to spot their talents and then help them to support them to become even more successful. I didn't know at the time that you were, calling that coaching, but that for me was my core competence, if you want, at the time. So I decided to add coaching. Now, immediately when you go the coaching track, it's the NLP track, it's meta coaching, and you add modalities gradually onto it. But I think my major breakthrough came because coaching can be, with all respect, can be very left brain, very cognitive orientated. And what the constellation work opened up for me as a door, as a huge new experience curve, was exactly that, the experience about what I am talking about. So the embodiment part of coaching got amplified through family constellations and systemic constellations. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that was my.
Absolutely. And I like the word that you said, embodiment, because and the thing is, when we work with people, that and coaching, as you say, is very much narrative, left brain, although I wouldn't say that in all the techniques.
No, in all
But
fairness, no.
but I loved when I set up a systemic piece of work is when I say to the client, what is happening in your body? And it's almost like it rattles the cage a little bit, because what is happening in the body is almost like they're getting a different message and a different insight coming through. when they realize that what they have worked out as, for instance, this is going to work, this is my path forward, this is my goal. And then when we set it up in a systemic piece of work in the field, it's almost like this doesn't work. There is almost like something new is coming up. And it's almost like now we can look at the goal in the field instead of having to go through all the disappointments because the goal's not working. So now in the field, we can set up what is it that is not pro your goal? What are the blockages that are coming up that you had not considered when you set a certain goal? And then when they look at those blockages that they hadn't considered, it's almost like, oh, now I have to consider that before I consider my goal. Doesn't mean the goal cannot be achieved, but the hardships of having to go through the blockages in a year or 2 or 3 that can create havoc in one's life, in one's business life, in one's career, now can be looked at and, okay, I hadn't considered that. Maybe I need to first do X, Y, Z. Maybe I need to look at this. Maybe I need to look at that. Maybe I need to deal with the blockages. And dealing with the blockages in the field, for me, is like opens up the space in a different way forward.
I think beautifully said. I think a small little step back from that, when the client and the client and the facilitator enter the space of constellation coaching, as you call it, I think the first question is, what is your question? Well, what are you bringing to the session with you? And what's really beautiful, what I learned earlier on in the early training days, was the whole idea that we carry certain burdens, certain questions, certain feelings, emotions, disturbances in our subconscious. But when we externalize them in the form of a representation, whether that's another person's body or a piece of paper on the floor as a placemat or whatever it is, when we do that and we can externalize, there's a certain healthy disassociation from this thing that is always sitting with me. And I have this kind of healthy distance. I can, as you say, I can now look at it. I can place it. I can bring it closer. I can create more distance. And as I do that, I can calibrate what my body is feeling about that distance, about that emotion. And so for me, the integration with the body work is one of the components that flows naturally in constellation work. I also like to call it spatial representation. Not everybody is familiar or comfortable with the word constellation, but because it's just not so used anymore. But spatial representation is, there could be a bigger space or a smaller space or a closer space between me and the things that I want to work with. And just that already creates, as I say, that healthy disassociation.
I love what you say, the spatial, I call it mapping. We basically work with a map, whether the map is as in physical representations or whether it is in the field on, we work with papers, or I work remotely with it being on a movable disc. And the thing is, so what I love about it is your internal world is mapped and you see it, as you said, from an external point of view. So your internal world now is put into an external representation or map. So that external representation allows us to have a much better view on what is actually happening inside of us. And so all these knots that are inside of us become visible. And the decision making now is on a different level. It's not an internal flow. You know, we say the same story over and over. And when we have the same story over and over, we can't, it's our story, it's our internal world. And we go over and over in the internal world. So when we put it outside, then it is, wow, it looks different. We get a different vantage point. And from that vantage point, we get new insights that we then can internalize again, because it's a game between the internal, external world. So it's a beautiful way of just seeing something different and getting new insights.
Exactly. I want to underline what you're saying there. And my feeling is that when we work with the externalized mapping and we play and experiment and calibrate with the different ways that can be distance or solutions can be found, once there's a satisfaction about, yeah, that feels good, that's the way forward, that's the resource place in the system, I should look more towards my resources. Once that externalized map is more clear, then of course the client internalize that back as a new resource. And that's the beautiful internal external movement of constellation or mapping that we use in coaching. The client then walks away feeling much more resourced in approaching the challenges that he came with.
I love the way you say it's a new resource. And the beauty about it is it's also the body has agreed with it. And so we know that whatever our body agrees with, we can do easier. So it takes away that blockage, that same belief that I have always bumped my head against. That belief now has transformed, may still be the same belief, but viewed in a way where the body can say, hang on, this is the way forward and this works for us. And when the body agrees, it's so easy, because then we don't have to fight between an external belief and an internal feeling, because now it's aligned. It becomes congruent.
Beautiful. And I think one of the words you used when you explained the way that you look at it, you said perspective. Now, for me, that's a very powerful word in this modality of coaching, because the client arrives with a certain perspective. The perspective is based on a belief that he's holding. You know, if I do this, it won't work. If I do that, I'm stuck again. So there's a certain a belief formation that leads the client to a place of stuckness, and the solutions are hidden. Now, what happens in this process is we can experiment with multiple perspectives, and then we can incorporate those perspectives that are most resourceful towards the solution. So it's very much solution focused in that sense. Now, I'm not saying for one moment that other coaching modalities are not solution focused. I think most coaching modalities are solution focused. But as you indicated, the alignment, the embodiment of that choice and that decision is very succinct. And phenomenology, from a phenomenological point of view, it's completely integrated, which make the resourcefulness then very clear in the client's mind, but also very executable. It's easy now to go and do what's needed to be done, because there's no fighting. There's no internal fighting about it anymore.
So I want to go to one of our core, shall I say, core beliefs in this work is when we are disconnected, we are not aware that we are disconnected. We are, in our minds, doing everything in a very connected way. And what this work shows up is you're not connected. And then it is, but why not? I am. And when this disconnection shows up, it also allows us to find the connection. So whether we do family constellations, whether we do systemic constellations, doesn't matter what we do. When we feel disconnected, it is the blockages that we have to overcome. When we are connected, it feels just so right. There is no blockage. It's in flow. So often people don't feel disconnected because in their minds, they're not disconnected because they have rationalized it all out. And then when we do the mapping or the spatial representation, then it gives a different picture. And I often see clients saying, it's true, I know it, but I didn't know it was impacting me.
I think you spot on with that, and it's just in that connect, disconnect, we can probably weave a whole very experienced conversation around. I think what happens mostly, and in corporate, but maybe also in personal relationship space and family space, is that we learn over time to adopt a certain mask, an appropriate role that we play. You know, this is the role of a husband, this is the role of a wife, this is the role of the kids, and we better stay within the boundaries of our roles. Or in a working space, this is my task, I'm the financial manager. I need to red flag when things are going overboard and when people spend too much money. But that's the role that I play in an organizational space. So it's very much linked to what is appropriate. It's linked to what is expected of me. But often what happens is that the alignment with self, the alignment with my own subconscious, in other words, also the alignment with the way that I feel about the work that I'm doing, that alignment is misaligned. And so that shows up in a constellation when we do constellations, that we clearly can see and spot where the disconnects are. So this work in the organizational space is a beautiful way to detect, also an analysis tool. By just moving bodies around on the floor and finding their spaces, we can already detect who is more comfortable in what space. So all of this are beautiful indicators for the coach that works in an organizational space. So just wanted to add that bit as well.
Awesome. Yes. Yes. And the thing is, we all have a purpose and a place in life. But how many of us feel, no matter where I am, it's like I'm always not quite fitting in and I'm not sure if it's me. Generally, it feels like it's the others around me. And you feel lost in terms of how am I going to make my position work? How am I going to be comfortable and confident in what I am bringing across in my value? And when we set up a constellation, for me, or a mapping, it's so clear. We can actually step into it and see, wow, it's not me. It is other people's perspective of me. I wasn't aware of that. And to actually get that in a space, first of all, that is safe, because when we set up a field with representative, it's safe. It's given with integrity, and I can accept it. Wow, I didn't see what other people are thinking of me. They are valuing me, but it's my perception. Or it is something I am distancing myself unconsciously, and I shouldn't be doing that. I should be looking, I should be moving closer, or sometimes I should be just moving back and let somebody else give the information that is valuable to me. So that is what you talk about, the movement in the field, but it's also the information that's given. It's often given verbally, but it's also given just with movement of the body. And then my body in the field reacts to a closer movement or a further movement. And then I have to deal with that. Wow, people are looking at me strange, and actually they're not. So I have to rewire something in my brain. So yeah, I love it that we can see that our perceptions of others, when given back to us in the field, can be re-evaluated.
Yes, and I think that to add to your train of thought, during our comment on another self, another perspective on another self, we also came across a few of these ideas. But what's very interesting now, perhaps, is to also look at what's the bridge between family constellations and organizational work. And I often, in the space that I'm operating in, get questions like, yeah, but I don't relate well to authority, for example. Or I feel, sometimes I really feel invisible in this team. It's like people don't see me. I don't see other people. I just feel like I could sit in a corner and nobody will even notice. So all of these kind of things, especially the authority one, another common theme, maybe you have some other themes that you can think of, but one of the common themes is it's hard to maintain relationships. And the question then is, can family constellations help with that? So as we touched on earlier on in previous conversations, I think that without family constellations, it's very difficult if we try and solve problems in an organizational space, separate from family constellation, because often the team member enters the space of an organizational culture with his own baggage or his own blind spots or his own thoughts, belief systems about how he should behave, which comes from his own family history. Now, that's the time when we can add a lot of value with family constellations in the space of coaching.
Absolutely. So my background work is I did trauma work before I came into the constellations. And what I'm realizing with exactly what you're saying, I don't take well to authority. Often something happened early in life, and we had to build what I call mechanisms to overcome difficult family situations, mechanisms to learn to navigate the world as it works for me. So each of us has learned to navigate the world as it works for them. So when we then come into the workspace, I'm coming in with the way the world I have navigated my world. Everybody else comes in with the way they navigate their world. And so we want to create a team spirit. We need to create something that works for the company. And the company has a completely different way of needing to navigate to make profit, to, survive, to allow us to work in the company. And the navigation skills from one person to another and to the company just do not gel. And they don't gel when I don't understand my navigation tool, when I don't understand why am I resistant to authority? Why am I an independent thinker? And when I'm an independent thinker and I'm in a team and everybody ignores my thinking and I now start feeling invisible, what am I going to do? How am I going to make myself heard? And so it's a lot of stuff that plays out in just a team, let alone in a company. And this is the beauty when we then take this individual and this individual understands, oh, that is how I survived. I don't need this navigation tool anymore because right now in this team, it doesn't work. And that we set it up in the map, we can see it. And this person can then get a new navigation tool, which may work better going forward. So that's really what I see a lot when I do teamwork or when I enter the systemic field.
Yeah, you just gave me an idea. And this is exactly what comes out in these conversations, is that we navigate each other to higher levels of understanding. But suddenly it dawned on me that life is already complex. So family systems are already complex. And then we bring ourselves into a team where everyone else brings their family complexity in. So one could say, just testing this, one could say that constellation work or spatial representation, or whatever we call it, is a decompress chamber for complexity. So we can simplify, yeah. So we can simplify things, understandings, relationships, and create flow. But in a nutshell, is to decompress the complexity and make it clear of what needs to be done in order for everybody to operate functionally towards everybody's well-being. Because often when we get clouded with this complexity, more complexity gets layered on top of that. And that's where the fan gets unpleasant.
Absolutely. But now we're going to add another, especially in South Africa, but I do believe it's across the world. Add to it that we have different cultures coming together. So when we work with family constellations, we're just working with a family who have the same upbringing, who are in the same family system. Bring two family systems together of a similar culture, but just of a different religious belief. Oh my word, we already have new things that are going to be exposed. Now go into the companies where we have different cultures with different belief systems coming together. And each belief and every culture needs and wants to belong and wants to be honored, has to be. And so then that also comes into play, because what I see as somebody who doesn't honor me is an honoring in their culture, but I'm not able to receive it because I don't see it that way. So it's about, I love this work when it comes to honoring each and every individual just as they are and for who they are. I love that about this work.
And that's exactly one of the tools to use when the complexity gets overwhelming, is the tool to take people as they are, to accept them as they are, relaxes our own creativity and our own talent to optimize itself. But by not accepting others, by fighting others the whole time, is not a good idea. It takes so much energy. It overloads our own creative system.
Absolutely. So bringing this just into a group setting, when I know as I honor you, you honor me, it already deflates the whole system. But if there is a resistance in me, and a constellation helps me to overcome that resistance, because that resistance may not have anything to do with the other person. It is my resistance to something that's in me. And so when I can align myself and say, wow, I never knew I had that resistance, and you call it the blind spots. I never knew I had this type of thinking. I never knew I had this inner resistance. I wonder where it's coming from. And so when I learn where this resistance, my invisible spot, is coming from, it serves me, but it also serves the people I surround myself with.
Exactly. Beautiful. So I don't know if you have any other themes. There are some loose ideas that one could add. I mean, we mentioned authority. We mentioned disconnection. We could also say that this work is a beautiful way to detect when there are certain patterns, but not only looking at the symptomatic level or the pattern level of an organization or a family system, but also to look at the foundational part of it. In other words, this work really is about working at a foundational level and change the patterning at a foundational level so that the patterns don't occur in future. So in that sense, it's one of the modalities that I came across that works very deeply.
Yeah, organizations have patterns, teams have patterns, and when we don't understand the patterns, it makes it difficult for us. But the one thing I also want to look at is this work does not replace any other work. With other words, it does not replace the coaching that the coach needs to do. It just is an add-on tool, and the coach can use it when it is needed in different situations. So I did not give up my coaching tools by bringing in this work. I added this as a point of understanding. What it did do is my coaching programs became shorter. My whole way of coaching became slightly different. And my understanding of the world has changed. So I believe that my coaching approach has changed.
Exactly. I like the way you phrase it. I think family constellations or systemic work works complementary. It doesn't want to replace other forms of therapy or counseling or narrative psychology or phenomenology or any of those types of approaches, but it rather complements, it works with it.
And I think it's important to stress that, because I often have clients who only come for constellations and then they get stuck on certain things that still need to be worked with. Yes, we can do a whole lot of constellations, but I do believe that we need to work it in conjunction with other work. For me, that is really important. So
maybe you
yeah,
could,
yeah.
sorry. Maybe you just want to comment quickly on a few things that are in the field. And you have a beautiful way of summarizing things, especially now after COVID. A lot of people complain about anxiety and stress for whatever reasons. Do you think this way of working can also help with that?
Well, the thing is, we have built, so my thinking is that during COVID, a lot of the underlying fears have actually surfaced, and we need to look at them now. So the fears have come up for us to look at. If we now ignore those fears and we just push them under again, they go and they're just going to bubble and bubble and bubble and create havoc. So so for me, it is about, yay, let's look at the fears. It's time we look at what you have not looked at before COVID, because you didn't need to look at, because it just worked. We could push it aside. We could go round about things, and we now can't, because daily we are challenged with new thinking of, right now, you and I started. We're having so many hours downtime as far as electricity supply is concerned. And what does it do? Oh, my work productivity is not as it should be. So what is it that I can use this time for that is additional, that is different, that is new, and that I have to incorporate as well? So we are living in times where we have to really, I like to say, dig deep and get out the nuggets that we don't know. Because the beauty about this work, we always talk about the negatives that we work with, but there's a lot of positive nuggets that also come out in this work. And so it is a time to, I would say, align that which doesn't work, but bring out the positives that does work and that we can do work.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Leon.
Cool.
I think this has been awesome talking to you again. I love talking to you. And thank you for spending this time with me. And I'm going to invite people to bring their questions, like, can I work with this? Can I work with this? And I think we need a lot of questions so that we can have another session where we can just talk to people about their questions.
That will be
wonderful being with me today.
Yeah, thank you. That'll be wonderful. Thanks.
Awesome.